ലോകജാലകത്തിലൂടെ നമ്മുടെ ജീവിത പങ്കാളിയെ കണ്ടെത്താൻ
വേൾഡ് മാട്രിമോണി.
Step in identifying stakeholders. Identifying all of firm's stakeholders can be a daunting task. In fact, as we will note again shortly, a list of stakeholders that is too long actually may reduce the effectiveness of this important tool by overwhelming decision makers with too much information. To simplify the process, we suggest that you start by identifying groups that fall into one of four categories: organizational, capital market, product market, and social. Let's take a closer look at this step. Step 1. Determining influences on mission, vision, and strategy formulation. One way to analyze the importance and roles of the individuals who compose a stakeholder groups is to identify the people and teams who should be consulted as a strategy is developed or who will play some part in its eventual implementation. These are organizational stakeholders, and they include both high-level managers and frontline workers. Capital market stakeholders are groups that affect the ability or cost of capital shareholders, venture capitalists, bank, and other financial intermediaries. Product market stakeholders include parties with whom the firm share its industry, including suppliers and customers. Social stakeholders consist broadly of external groups and organizations that may be affected by or exercise influence over firm strategy and performance, such as unions, governments, and activist groups. The next two steps are to determine how various stakeholders are affected by the firm's strategic decision and the degree of power that various stakeholders wield over the firm's ability to choose a course of action. Step 2. Determining the effects of key decision on the stakeholders. Step 2. In stakeholders analysis is to determine the nature of the effect of the firm's strategic decision on the list of relevant stakeholders. Not all stakeholders are affected equally by strategic decision. Some effects may be rather mild, and any positive or negative effect may be secondary of minimal impact. At the other end of the spectrum, some stakeholders bear the brunt of firm decision, good or bad. In performing step 1, companies often develop overly broad and unwieldy lists of stakeholders. At this stage, it's critical to determine the stakeholders who are most important based on how the firm's strategy affects the stakeholders. You must determine which of the groups still on your list have direct or indirect material claims on firm performance or which are potentially adversely affected. For instance, it is easy to see how shareholders are affected by firm strategy. Their will either increases or decreases in correspondence with the firm's action. Other parties have economic interest in the firm as well, such as parties the firm interact with in the marketplace, including supplier and customer. The effects on other parties may be much more indirect. For instance, governments have an economic interest in firms doing well. They collect tax revenue from them. However, in cities that are well diversified with many lawyers, a simple firm has minimal economic impact on what the government collects. Alternatively, in other areas, individual firms represent a significant contribution to local employment and tax revenue. In those situations, the effect of firm action on the government would be much greater. Step 3. Determining stakeholders' power and influence over decision. The third step of a stakeholder analyzing is to determine the degree to which stakeholder groups can exercise power and influence over the decisions the firm makes, does the group have direct control over what is decided? Veto power over decision. No-sans influence or no influence recognize that although the degree to which a stakeholder is affected by firm's decision. Step 2 is sometimes highly correlated with their power and influence over the decision is often not the case. For instance, in some companies, frontline employees may be directly affected by firm decisions but have no say in what those decisions are. Power can take the form of formal voting power, board of directors and owners, economic power, supplier, financial institution, and unions, or political power dissident, stockholder, political action groups, and governmental bodies. Sometimes the parties that exercise significant power over firm decisions don't registered as having a significant stake in the firm. Step 2. In recent years, for example, Walmart has encountered significant resistance in some communities by well-organized groups who oppose the entry of the mega retailer. Walmart executives now have to anticipate whether a vocal and politically powerful community group will oppose its new store or aim to reduce their size, which decreases Walmart's per store profitability. Indeed, in many markets, such groups have been effective at blocking new stores, reducing their size, or changing buildings specifications. Once you've determined who has a stake in the outcomes of the firm's decision as well as who has power over this decision, you'll have bases on which to allocate prominence in strategy formulations and strategy implementation processes. The framework in the figure will also help you categorize stakeholders according to their influence in determining strategy versus their importance to strategy execution. For one thing, this distinction may help you identify major omissions in strategy formulations and implementations. Having identified stakeholder group and differentiated them by how they are affected by firm decision and the power they have to influence decision, you'll want to ask yourself some additional questions. Have I identified any vulnerable point in either the strategy or its potential implementations? Which groups are mobilized and active on promoting their interests? Have I identified supporters and opponents of the strategies? Which group will benefit from a successful execution of the strategy and which may be adversely affected? Where are various groups located? Who belong to them? Who represent them? The stakeholder analysis framework summarized in the figure is a good starting point, ultimately because mission and vision are necessarily long-term in orientation. Identifying important stakeholder groups will help you to understand which constituencies stand to gain or to lose the most if they are realized. Two of the challenges of performing stakeholder analysis are determining how stakeholders are affected by a firm decision and how much influence they have over the implementation of the decision that are made. Many people have a tendency to fall into the trap of assessing all stakeholders as being important on both dimensions. In reality, not all stakeholders are affected in the same way, and not all stakeholders have the same level of influence in determining what the firm does. Moreover, when stakeholder analysis is executed well, the resulting strategy has been better chance of succeeding simply because the entities you might rely on in the implementation phase were already involved in the strategy starting with the formulation phase. Thus, You now have a good idea of how to engage various stakeholders in all the stages of the POLC framework. Key takeaway. This section introduces stakeholders, their roles, and how to begin assessing their roles in the developing of the organization's mission and visions. While many persons or organizations with stake in your organization is the stakeholders, managers are most concerned with those stakeholders who have the most influence on or will be most influenced by the organizations. On the basis of your assessment of stakeholders, you now can be proactive in involving them in the POLC stages. Exercises. 1. What are stakeholders and why are they relevant to mission and vision? 2. Are stakeholders equally relevant to all part of POLC or only mission and vision? 3. What is stakeholders analysis? What are the 3 identification steps? 4. How does stakeholder analysis help you craft mission and vision statement? 5. Which important stakeholder might you intentionally include from a mission or vision statement? 6. What are the risks of not conducting stakeholder analysis as an input to the formulation of your mission and vision?